Hi, my name is Elena Ninja. I will be doing an extension of my speech through the career and scholarly lens on why do people with multi-marginalized identities and PWI require more mental health advocacy. So, to start off, multi-marginalized identities include everyone who doesn't fit into Eurocentric culture and standards of acceptability. Things such as beauty, ethnicity, wealth, positionality all play into whether or not someone is deemed acceptable in the eyes of American society. These trickle down to social situations and literally anyone's day-to-day life, places such as your workplace, primary, middle, high school, and university. Mental health conditions can affect your mood, thinking, and overall behaviors. In order to really understand the significance of mental health disparities among marginalized identities, it's important to understand stigma. Stigma meaning a mark of disgrace associated with particular circumstances, in this situation, mental health. As a person of color, I always knew that mental health was really never seriously talked about within the Black community, as much as it was discussed and respected by my white peers and their family. In a study explaining why mental health care is less accessible to marginalized communities, it states in a 2020 survey found that 48% of white adults with mental illness utilize mental health services in comparison to a striking 23% of marginalized identities who utilize mental health services. I personally dealt with my own mom denouncing my mental health until it got really bad to the point where I had to do something about it, and we all had to do something about it. So I definitely understand why the statistics are there's such a 20% difference. I think that it's really hard for the black community or other communities to admit that there is a huge problem in denouncing of mental health within the community, and stigma that has gone back years and years and generations past our generation. Studies show that LGBTQ individuals of color are at higher risk for mental health issues due to the intersections of racism, homophobia, and transphobia. Research has found that individuals with disabilities from marginalized identities often faced barriers in accessing mental health services. Throughout my research, it was extremely clear that accessibility acts as a big disservice when it comes to multi-marginalized identities accessing decent help for mental health illness. These statistics help shed a light on the importance of advocating for mental health support that is inclusive and addresses the specific needs of multi-marginalized individuals. Lack of access to services, transportation, racial and ethnic mismatch, mistrust of providers, and stigma all play a part in these issues. I know that when it goes to racism within the community, racism within structures, those all trickle down to why people of color aren't able to access mental health at the rate that they should be able to access it, and at the rate that their experiences force them to deal with these issues that they have a lot of times no access to help for. It's really sad because marginalized identities are 78% more at risk for mental health issues than their white peers. Statistic breakdowns of analyzing how stigma and access affects one's likeliness to experience mental unwellness show that there is an alarming difference between people with more marginalized identities and their mental illness and how they view it versus their white peers or people who don't fall in marginalized identity groups. There was a study published in 2020 to measure young people's health status, as well as explore the association between mental health status and belonging to one or more socio-cultural marginalized group. Of the 63.3% of the people who belong to one or more of the marginalized groups, the study shows that as the number of marginalized groups the participant belongs to increases, the less likely the participant rated their mental health as excellent or good. Marginalized participants were 55.4% more likely to have mental health conditions than the non-marginalized groups. Why? Well, a lot of professors and professionals in this subject, not directly, but who talk about different things, shed light on this. One of which that I was really interested in, what she had to say, was Dr. Joy DeGruy, a researcher and author who has shed light on intergenerational trauma experiences by marginalized communities. She coined the term post-traumatic slave syndrome, PTSS, and her research stresses the importance of understanding historical traumas to explain contemporary issues faced by marginalized identities, such as African Americans. One thing that she does talk about is education advocacy, and that's a solution that I think is very probable to start helping when it comes to giving students access to good and decent mental health things that you can do to help yourself. So she talks about advocating for culturally responsive education and training that acknowledges the diverse experience and history of marginalized communities. She believed that education played a crucial role in addressing and overcoming the effect of historical trauma, and not just educating people about these people's experiences and why they may do the things they do, but also taking into account that the more that you use that in the process of teaching people stuff and educating people about just anything, the more and more you take into consideration that when you're in middle school, you're teaching in high school, you're teaching in college, the better your teaching is for the students who are dealing with these different circumstances that require more attention or different ways of learning and teaching because of their experiences. The lack of mental health advocacy for marginalized identities attending PWIs are extremely underreported. Very little studies on the extent of being in a predominantly white institution and how that may have affected your health. However, the evidence is clear that something needs to be done. Thank you.